Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, thank you for joining today, folks. We are, of course, live. You are watching this one live. This is not pre-recorded, and it's going to be a fun evening here as we go ahead and talk all about GitHub Actions and GitHub. So you know the deal. You like what you see, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you know as soon as there's brand new content. And if YouTube is not your thing and you're listening to this after the fact, in which case we won't be live because you're listening to it after the fact, then go ahead and like on that channel. Go ahead and drop us a tweet or let us know that you like the content, because it does help. It does help steer us into the type of things that you want to see and making more of it. So without further ado, I have a guest on the show today. We've once again got Carl Cook joining us here, and we'll waste no further ado, and we will jump over and introduce Carl to the show. Hello there, Carl. Good evening. How are we doing?
Not too bad, Chris. How are you?
All good, thank you. All good. Welcome back. I'm glad to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
No, all good. So last time we talked architecture with cloudwithchris.com and all of the, the storage accounts and the CDNs and the DNS and all the different bits and pieces that I'm using for that side of things. We started talking about GitHub, didn't quite get around to really diving into the nuts and bolts, so we thought, why not do another one? And here we are. So that's my bit done. I think I hand over the reins to yourself again now, sir, and you can play host for the evening.
Sure, I'll take over the interrogation or the interview. So thanks for joining us. My name's Carl Cook, as you can see on the screen there. Twitter handle is @Carl_IT_nerd.
Not Carl Cook.
Yeah. Poor random Carl Cook. Lives somewhere in London, was getting tagged and all that stuff earlier, so that's good.
Yes, I made a bit of a Twitter faux pas for anyone listening in. So
that's one way to grow a Twitter following, is just tag random people.
Absolutely.
So last time we were here, as Chris says, we were talking about Azure architecture and the platform that supports the cloudwithchris.com website. Today we want to focus on GitHub and GitHub Actions. We ran out of time the last time and wanted to get a bit deeper, so we decided that this one deserved its own episode. Okay, so let's get the controversial question out of the road first. Chris, so why GitHub Actions and not Azure DevOps?
Sure. Good question. It's a question I'm seeing come up a lot when I talk about GitHub and Azure DevOps and the like. So I guess ultimately, first off, right, I don't think it's necessarily a case of either or. You can absolutely use both with each other. And I think a lot of people are kind of going for I either use one or the other, but actually you have this nice kind of hybrid scenario. For me, Cloud with Chris is really about the community. It's really about being open about the stuff that I'm working on, and love having people coming in, contributing and being on the show and being part of the community. So for me, what I was thinking was, yes, there is the public organization functionality, or public projects I should say, functionality inside of Azure DevOps. Could use that, could use pipelines and repos and all those things, but when there's a brilliant tool which is out there for open source called GitHub, why not go ahead and use that? And I'm very much one to go and kind of experiment with things, play with things, and maybe we can, that's something we should add to our list actually for talking today, about making a GitHub action itself, not the workflow, but the action. But to get back to the root of your question, I think for me, there's obviously these two great tools. Azure DevOps I've used years and years. I've come from the TFS background as well, so I'm very familiar with it. Personally, I want to learn something new. I always like keeping myself challenged and fresh. And, I think it's a great tool for the job for the community side of things. The obvious elephant in the room that I know people are thinking is Azure DevOps going away? What's happening with GitHub? And, it can't go away, right? When you think about the years and years that Microsoft have put into Azure DevOps and all of the code, for example, that Microsoft runs on Azure DevOps, it's not going to be going
Mhm.
away anytime soon. That's obviously never say never. I'm sure at some point there's probably going to be something which happens with both of them, because if I was a business, would I run two platforms the exact same thing? If I was a betting person, probably not. But it's not going to happen anytime soon. So, I think what I would say if I were in that scenario is looking at case by case basis, going back to the
Yep.
hybrid piece that I mentioned. So Azure DevOps is really great for certain scenarios, like really granular permissions. It's got, for example, when you create the Azure DevOps organization, you have to select a region. You can't do that with GitHub today, for example. So there are legitimate requirement differences where you might need to go one or the other anyway. And really, I think it's a case then of looking at those almost the individual segments of the tools and going which one fits best for the scenario, and then
Yeah.
kind of going there. So bit of a long-winded answer to a short question, but I think we got there in the end.
So the short answer there, would you agree, would be whatever the best fit for the scenario is?
Absolutely. I don't think you need to go wholemeal and kind of go, I'm going Azure DevOps or GitHub. You can use both and look at, is it GitHub repos and Azure boards, or is it GitHub repos and Azure pipelines, for example, and go from there? Because we'll probably get into it a bit later, but GitHub Actions is still quite immature, sounds like the wrong word, but it's still in its infancy.
Still quite young.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the features like releases and environments only came out before Christmas, for example. Whereas with Azure pipelines, they've been there for years and years and years, right? So there's, again, things like that where it's still evolving and growing as a project. And again, what's your appetite to risk and what's your appetite to the brand new innovative stuff? All of those kind of questions, really.
All right, excellent, thank you. So let's give us the 30,000-foot view of GitHub Actions then. What is it for someone who has never touched Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions before? Tell everybody what it is. 30,000-foot
Absolutely.
view.
So GitHub Actions and Azure pipelines, let's not compare, but kind of use those both as examples of the same thing here. So if you think about the scenario where I'm Chris, I'm the dumb human sat in between a chair and a keyboard or my monitors, whatever here. And rather than me going ahead, going clickety-click, go and upload something into my Azure storage account so all my users can go and see it across the globe, and then, oh, I forgot to purge my CDN, now I need to go and do that. Rather than relying on me as a human and manual error and potentially things going wrong, to be quite honest, why don't I use a system to go ahead and automate some of that functionality for me? So automatically recognizing when I've made a change to my code repository, for example, and doing something off the back of that. And I tell it what that something is. It goes and follows a series of tasks, a series of steps. And then at the end of that, that thing is done. So no more do I have to rely on the human between the chair and the keyboard who is going to, incorrectly type the command, get something wrong, delete the storage account or anything like that. I've got that end-to-end process and that end-to-end pipeline, or that end-to-end workflow, as maybe that's a nice segue for you to come in on a minute, is then effectively what we're building there.
Right.
That's it at a 30,000.
Okay, excellent. So let's talk workflow. So we discussed before how workflow has multiple meanings in general. So we could talk about the entire process being a workflow. But when I say workflow in this context, I mean, let's take one of your collection of GitHub Actions, I suppose, is another way of framing that.
Yeah.
And do you want to step through one of your existing setups, say posting to your preview site or posting to staging?
Sure.
Do you want to step through that so people can see what this looks like? And for anybody that's used to Azure DevOps, you'll notice, and particularly pipelines, obviously, you'll notice a lot of similarities with what you're seeing here and how that looks, because I suspect it's certain parts of this are very similar underneath. So you might recognize some of what Chris is about to show you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I'll do first is I'll show the more kind of visual representation of stuff that has already run. And then what we can do is maybe look and map that back to some of the code, some of the YAML is actually building that and making that happen here.
Okay, sounds good.
So on the left-hand side here, you can see a load of workflows. So think of a workflow as a pipeline in Azure DevOps speak. So you have loads of pipeline definitions. That is effectively your workflow file that we'll talk about a bit later. But in GitHub, they're called GitHub Action Workflows. So that's where we had a bit of a giggle earlier, because when we were just doing a quick summary of what we're going to talk about during the session, I was like, hold on, do you mean workflow the process or workflow the file? Which one are we talking here? So these are all GitHub Action workflows. That's effectively the same thing as a pipeline in Azure Pipelines here. And then what you can see on the right-hand side of the screen is all of my workflow runs. So again, similar in the Azure DevOps speak is pipeline runs. So an execution of that particular workflow. So you can see on the right, I've got a load of different pipeline runs that have happened there across all my different workflows that I've got here. So let's go ahead and just take a look maybe at this staging site for the time being here. So I've got a few different runs which have happened here again. Let's just go jump into one here. And again, for anyone who's used tools like GitLab, Azure Pipelines, or similar, this experience will look refreshingly similar here, refreshingly familiar. So you've got a number of things going on here. You've got a number of jobs on the left-hand side that you can see here. We'll come back to jobs in a moment. We can see, for example, this workflow was triggered by me, Chris Reddington. It was a push to this particular dev branch, I should say here, and this is the commit that triggered it. Overall, that workflow run was successful. It took 19 minutes, and there was one artifact produced off the back of that. And then what we can see underneath here is there's a staging.yaml, and again, we'll come back to that in a bit, what that is and why that's there. But then we've got these different almost stages is what they look like here. So you can see we've got all of these jobs then from the left-hand side, which map to these different stages effectively here. So you can see I've got some different tasks for image stuff, for some linting, I do the build, and then I publish to some different environments as well. So I've got an AWS, an Azure, and a GCP. Only for staging. My production is just Azure. I am working long term on making that cross-cloud, but it's just not a priority for me at the moment. So, on the back burner, that one. So then what we can do is we can jump into any of those jobs here. So, we could click on this image actions, for example. Then we can go and see the individual tasks that take place as part of that job there, or part of that stage. So you can see, for example, we've got the setting up the job, pulling that image down, checking out the repo, compressing images, and that does all it needs to do. And again, refreshingly similar or refreshingly familiar. I'm going to get a buzzword or phrase in here, I'm sure. We can see all of our logs going on. So I can go and see, for example, all the things that are happening if I need to. And you can control some of that granularity. You can go ahead and turn certain debug levels on and all these kind of things there as well. But we can go ahead, jump around between all those jobs as well, just as we would expect. As you can see here, publish to Azure, for example, and we've got the different steps that I actually take to deploy to Azure. And that is the kind of UI side of it, really, in a nutshell. We can jump over to the YAML file and take a look at that, or
sure. Well, yeah, let's go over to we'll talk testing and linting in a few minutes, but let's talk about the YAML, because everybody knows, if they're familiar with Azure DevOps, and I keep referring back to Azure DevOps because it's what I'm familiar with.
It's a good anchor point.
That you can build your pipelines with YAML, as well as the classic way through the GUI, and the YAML pipelines obviously have their own wizard to build from a GUI perspective as well in Azure DevOps. So let's have a look at what the YAML looks like for these workflows.
Absolutely.
Pipelines, workflows.
And I keep doing that as well, so don't worry. So what I'm going to do, just to really call out explicitly for anyone listening in here, on the main folder of my repository, or main repo root, I guess, and let me just turn off notifications here. There we go. you can see I've got this .github folder right here. Now, .github is a bit of a convention for stuff that you might need to do with GitHub repository. So you can see I've got some for linters, I've got some stuff here for workflows, and a code owners file as well. If you ever want issue templates, for example, for your GitHub issues, you can go and do that as well. I probably have an example somewhere that we can dive into later, actually. But as you can see here, we're going to be focusing on workflows. And in here, I've got a number of different YAML files. So I've got this Azure Static Web Apps. So that's a bit of a hint, again, to come back to a bit later there, Carl. Something we can talk on there. But then I've got all these other YAML files that I've created. So what we're going to do, we were focusing on staging a bit earlier. So we'll just take a look at staging.yaml. And I just want to dive into a few things about, maybe not dive in that much. Come on, Chris, that's... going a bit farther. There we go.
Wrong way.
Exactly. There we go. Right, one more. There we go. That's more readable, I think. Good. So what you can see here, I'll just kind of walk through the schema here. So we've got to give the workflow a name. So that's where I've called it staging dev. All of these workflows have some kind of trigger. So for example, here I trigger on a push, and it happens to be to the dev branch. And there's no real filtering of what changes there. So any path in my dev branch, as long as it changes, that workflow gets triggered. At this point, it's really worth calling out the GitHub Actions is called GitHub Actions for a reason. So, it's not called like GitHub CI/CD or GitHub development deployment tools or something like that. It's GitHub Actions. So when you think about the scenario where I don't know, I create a new issue in my repository, for example, and I want to go ahead and react to that, you can go and do that. If I create a new project board, if I comment on a GitHub issue, all of these things are actions that GitHub Actions can actually link up to, and it can effectively read that event and react to that event. So really, GitHub Actions is more than just a CI/CD platform. You can react to a loads of these different objects and the things that happen to those objects inside of GitHub there as well. So really, really clever and really cool way of building the platform there. So then underneath, what we can see is we've got this jobs property. So jobs, again, if you've come from the Azure Pipelines world or Azure DevOps, whether it was classic UI, you still had the concept of jobs, but in the YAML for Azure Pipelines as well, you have the concept of jobs there. No real difference, to be honest. A job, for example, you can see I've got this one called compressor here. That is a job. Lint is a job. Build is a job, and again we'll come back to those in a bit, but each of those kind of indentation levels indicates a job there. So each job will effectively have a separate agent, I believe, if memory serves me right. Because what you can, in fact it does, yeah, because you can see there for each job we specify what agent it's running on, so it's going to be assigned each time there. So then we give those jobs a name. So I just give that one a really helpful name of Calibre Image Actions. I could rename that to something nicer like Image Compressor or something like that. But then we have our series of steps. So in Azure Pipelines, I think the term was tasks. Oh no, it was actually steps, if I remember rightly. But then you had tasks below that. So below our steps in GitHub Actions, in the workflow file here, we have our actions. Now, maybe for a bit of audience participation on the live chat, I think there's a few people who may have seen some of my talks on this before. Maybe you have, Carl, as well. So we'll let some of the other folks maybe answer first. We'll do a bit of a countdown timer or something. But this type here, we've got this property for each of these individual items in this steps property here. And it has the users property. And it's got this kind of name/name and then a version thing going on. Can anyone in the chat, and feel free to type in here, can anyone identify what that relates to at all? What might be special about this? Because it keeps occurring. You can see we've got it for action/checkout. We've got it for Calibre app/image-actions. We've got one down here, Peter Evans, create pull request, etc. We'll give a couple of seconds, see if anyone's brave enough to jump into the chat at all.
Yeah, it was definitely mentioned at the LDNA chat you did, so
Yep.
I'm not going to spoil it.
So we might have a few shy folks here today. Um, but to make sure we keep moving on here and conscious of our time, um, that is effectively just another GitHub repository. So we'll actually take a look at some other GitHub actions later because I've made my own GitHub action, again, for the stuff that I do for this particular blog as well. So I'm not using it yet. I still need to integrate it. I haven't quite tested it thoroughly so I can bring it in yet, but that's on my backlog there. But each of these is really just another GitHub repository. So if we just look at the action/checkouts repository here for a sec. Oh, GitHub. I'm not sure what I'd say if I went to GitHub. That may not be something I want to do live. If we then go here, you can see we're on this action/checkouts repository. If I just roll across here onto the right-hand side, every repository that we see will have some kind of releases there. If we just go ahead and click on releases, you'll see that somewhere in there is a tag for V2, and I've probably scrolled past it, to be honest. There it is, right here. So all that we're saying is for that GitHub action, GitHub Actions is going to pull in a repository which is at a certain tag level. It's been tagged at a certain version. So we'll pull the repository in at that point in time, and that is the version of the action that gets used. And that is why I love GitHub Actions, to come back to your earlier point. Exactly. It's so extensible. It's so open source. It's all about community. But at the same time, it's so extensible. It's so open source. It's so community driven that do I necessarily trust, for example, the random Peter-Evans create pull request, for example, action? And this is where you then need to take your kind of enterprise hat on if you're in that enterprise world and think about your dependencies, what you're bringing into your workflows, for example, and all of these kind of things. But for my blog, if anyone really wants to be that nefarious in terms of serving up the content, okay, that's on me for not doing the rigor.
And yeah, listen, there are plenty of horror stories about supply chain attacks and stuff like that. But you know, the real beauty about open source software and open source community like this is that your code is effectively crowdsourced. It has this view of hundreds, thousands, maybe more people looking at it. So if you're up to something nefarious, as Chris says, someone's going to spot it and call it out fairly quickly in general.
Exactly.
You know, so you know, it's not closed source. You're not, with closed source software and technologies, you're not really getting a look at what's under the hood. Whereas open source, it's all developed in the open. You can see what's going on, and as Chris has done himself, you can go and contribute to these projects and contribute to the software that you're using.
Absolutely. Good. And then, you know, a lot of this then is very similar. We look at all of these different steps. There are actions. These actions have properties that you specify into them. Yeah, very, very similar. The one thing that is probably worth calling out here when we get to the publish stages, or publish jobs, I guess, is there's a sub property here for environment. Now, you're probably wondering at this point, hold on, where's environment coming to the mix? What on earth is this? So we can go ahead and take a look at another part of the UI in a moment, because a bit like Azure Pipelines, once again, where you can specify the environment in the YAML file and map it back to something in the UI, exact same kind of concept here. So we can add things like approvals, things like secrets, etc. in there as well.
Excellent.
And yeah, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And in terms of editing all of that, if we go to the edit button, because I'm in this magic.github/workflows folder, we get a nice special UI then that pops up in GitHub as well, just like you'd be used to from the Azure Pipelines editor as well if you've been doing the YAML there. So I could go and search for, you know, my Azure Actions, for example, go and see all of the Azure ones that pop up. Some of these will be first parties, you can see by the blue tick, so by the Azure team. Some of them then by random folks on GitHub who have made their own actions and publish them to the marketplace then as well.
And is this giving you code snippets then to stick into your YAML file?
Exactly. Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah. And
So you don't have to know everything up front. You can use this sort of interface to learn and build as you go. It's excellent.
absolutely. And to be fair as well, what you'll find from a lot of the actions, for example, and this is where I showed the action I've been building here, is they'll have everything documented with examples here as well. So this is one that I've been building in my spare time. It's actually going to be used as part of my content deployment or release, I guess. So I've mentioned on the show a few times before, something I'm really big on is cross-posting my content to other sites like medium.com, dev.to, other sites like that. And I've been working on a .NET Core command line app for ages, it feels like, at least, to go and do that for me. And the end goal has been I want to make that a GitHub action itself, so I can pull that into the workflow and it can automatically check, hey, what new posts are there that have been pushed in this latest release? Let's go and publish those to those locations. And again, that is just a GitHub action. Admittedly, I haven't used any versions yet because I'm not at a stage where it's production ready, so I'm just using main at the moment. But when I have a V1 cut, I'll change that to V1, and then people can use the V1 then if they want. And, you know, if anyone wants to see what a GitHub action looks like behind the scenes, we can walk through that one at some point as well. But yeah, just a .NET Core command line app running in a Docker image.
Okay, excellent. So we covered, you briefly mentioned linting. I want to cover off how are you linting and testing with your GitHub Actions?
Yeah, good question. So there's no, at the moment, and this is one of those scenarios, by the way, where do as I say, not as I do. Okay, folks, we got to take this into account here. I could definitely be doing more testing. I'm going to hold my hands up there, and I think anyone who ever says they're doing enough testing is going to be lying. So we'll leave that one there.
Okay.
But there's definitely more I could be doing. One of the things I'm actually looking into at the moment, it's on my list for this month and next month, is looking at Playwright. It was talked about a build for anyone who was kind of listening in, and it's a bit like a web UI kind of testing framework.
Okay.
So I want to bring some of that into my pipeline because, in all honesty, there was a time 6 to 8 weeks ago maybe where I'd actually broke my site for a period of time and I hadn't realized. And it wasn't broken, you know, fundamentally, like nothing could be viewed or anything like that. But actually I wasn't getting my I think it was my Google Analytics and then some other piece of JavaScript wasn't running because of some of the things we talked about last time, Carl, where I wanted to lock down what things could run from a JavaScript perspective. I inadvertently broke some stuff, which
so that
is
was
fine.
your security headers were almost too secure for what you needed.
Exactly. But long story short, yeah, I could be doing more testing. I think the beauty of this kind of project that I'm working on is with cloudwithchris.com is it's a static web app, so it is really just about the UI side of things predominantly. If I was building like the .NET app, for example, like I was talking about earlier, in fact, let's use this as an example. This one I am doing a load of testing on, and the way that one works, just as a slightly different scenario, we'll go back to Cloud with Chris in a sec, but this one here, I'm doing a few extra things. I'm actually using Sonar Cloud to track my dependencies and my technical debt and all these things, code coverage, etc. And then within that, I am using .NET Test to go and run my tests, go and collect coverage on my tests, etc. And they all get scooped out then by Sonar Cloud and are used for me to track how effective I'm being with my code development effectively. So that's how I would approach it in a project where I can do some more kind of typical testing, if you like.
Yeah.
With the linting side of things, because it's all Markdown, there's not really any compilation needed. There's, it's Hugo does that for me, right? For me, what's more important is that I'm following certain standards on my Markdown files and that I'm adhering to standards that if anyone does want to go and contribute into a blog post on Cloud with Chris, I'm not quite sure why they would, but sure, I'll be open to contributions if anyone likes. Is I want to make sure they're following certain standards so that as other people come to read and learn from that, then great. We've got consistency there. So the thing that I actually chose was something called GitHub Superlinter. Now that is, again, just another GitHub repository. So if we go and open that one up here. Here we go. And we've got another GitHub repo. And what you'll see in here, once again, unsurprisingly, as we scroll a bit further down, is an example of what the GitHub Actions workflow could look like. And the great thing about the Superlinter is it's open source, it's maintained and managed by GitHub, anyone can contribute into it. But look at all these different linters that it supports. So it itself isn't, the best way for me to describe this is it's not really the linter itself, it's kind of bringing in all these other linters and using those as it needs there. So you can see, for example, there's tons of different ones. I'm using Markdown lint because, of course, we're talking about Markdown here. So as we jump back into this one, here we go. Again, all it really is with the GitHub Actions side is going, right, what do you want to actually lint? Well, I just want to lint anything that is in my content subfolder, nothing else. I don't really care about anything else. It's the content directory that I'm most likely to see people contributing into. Maybe I could go and lint the HTML and the other pieces on my layouts, etc. But I think I had some issues because of Go and how it works and interpolation and all that stuff. But we go and specify the branch and various other properties there. And that's effectively what it takes to go ahead and make that run. There are a couple of other things, though. I mentioned earlier I've got this .github folder, and I have this linters subfolder. Well, in here I've got some, effectively some rules of how I want that Markdown lint to go and run. And these aren't really specific to the Superlinter. These are more like Markdown lint configuration at this point. Okay. And these are just rules that I say, hey, this is how I want my code to be measured against. These are the rules. So it's almost me saying these are the standards and the styles that I'm going to be working towards here. And that's it. That's it. That's it's a case of just running that action, and then action runs and says either, great, well done, you've been good, you followed everything that you should have done, nice one, or nah, sorry, you didn't quite cut the grade there, you need to go back and fix these things here, which happens to me more often than not. So don't worry, it's there for a reason, right? To protect yourself as much as anyone else. And yeah, that's the linting side of it.
Excellent. So I'd like to get into how you're setting up environments and stuff, but first off, I would like to cover how you're handling secrets.
Yeah.
In GitHub Actions.
Cool. Well, fortunately, both of those points are related. So, within GitHub Actions, well, even a step back, within GitHub repositories, of course, you have all of these items at the top tab here. I'm going to jump into settings here. And on the left-hand side, you'll notice we've got a couple of things. We've got actions and we've got environments and we've got secrets. We don't need to worry about actions here. So I'm going to look at secrets first. Now, when GitHub Actions originally came along, you didn't have the concept of environments. You just had secrets. So in the beginning, you could only scope secrets at the repository level, which means regardless of your workflow, whether it was a production, a dev, a staging, no matter where you were going, all of those workflows could have potentially pulled those repository secrets because, there's no real scope of me being this particular environment, for example. So it'd be on me to name the connections, or rather the secrets correctly. It would be on me to make sure I'm using the right one in the right environment and, not using the dev one in prod and prod in dev and vice versa and all these things. So this is one of the things that then got introduced with environments for GitHub Actions back in December or Christmas time, roughly. And you can see here that, again, these environment secrets are now exposed in this. Exposed is the wrong word for secrets. Are visualized in. Had to catch myself there very
That was a
quickly.
really bad choice of words.
That was a
there.
very bad choice of words. Nothing is exposed. It is all very safe in secrets, I can assure you. But you can see here, I can also see my environment secrets in this secrets view as well. But if I jump across to environments, then this is where that mapping that we mentioned a bit earlier of that property environment in the workflow file, what was it? I think it was staging.azure, wasn't it? We were looking at. This is where it then gets mapped to. Now, if it doesn't exist by the time you do your first workflow run, doesn't matter. GitHub actually automatically creates that for you, so it will be there by the time it runs. And you can see in here then, I can scope these secrets down to the individual environment. So why is that important? The reason for that is, think about the scenario I just mentioned. I've got a dev, I've got a staging, I've got a prod, I've got a preview, all these different environments. I don't want my production credentials being used anywhere except my production environment. So, because I've got the effectively the secret stored within this environment context here, what that means is this secret will only get pulled into a workflow run when we're going ahead and referencing that explicit environment. So it's a bit like principle of least privilege there. If we're running a production run, for example, or production job, then go ahead and use the appropriate credentials there then. And that's it. I mean, if I go ahead and try and update, I can't see the secret at all. I can only update it. Now, yes, of course, I could go and use something like Key Vault, etc. as well, instead of the environment secrets here, for example. And I think it really comes down to your policies internally at that point, or the customers, for example. There's great things you can do with managed identities and service principals and whatnot, but there's always a point where it rolls back to how are you logging into that thing eventually, right? So if you had a GitHub action runner on a Azure VM, I genuinely don't know if you could pull the managed service identity out. That's maybe a blog post coming up, I think. I've just given myself the idea there. But anyway, you get the point there. It's there's options. And
you can use that idea in a few minutes when we talk about your general process and how you get stuff onto your
Great
onto
idea.
your Kanban board.
Let's do it.
So we've talked about GitHub Actions. We've talked about how you're managing secrets, how you're managing your environments, how you're testing or not testing, and how you're linting your code. So
yeah.
Do you want to step through how to create a workflow or a set of actions from at a high level?
Yeah, sure.
Just for anybody that has maybe not seen them before.
Sure. Yeah. So I won't commit my changes here for obvious reasons that I don't want to start triggering loads of workflows here. Actually, you know what? Let's do it in a preview branch. Actually, that'll be fine.
Safer.
Exactly. Example workflow. Here we go. Let's practice some good practices here. So we'll go and to my .github workflows folder. The first thing I'll do is I'll create a new workflow. We'll go and save that just as the basic stuff here. And we'll go and edit that one. And at this point, I can go ahead and start editing. So I can start typing in, for example, name. So this will be my new workflow. Now, sometimes it is supposed to go ahead and do some like IntelliSense kind of functionality, though it might be my browser blocking that at the moment here. So rather than spending the time debugging it live, what you can see here is I start scaffolding out all these different pieces. Notice though, for example, I've already got a little red squiggly there saying that I've done something wrong. So again, that's a good indicator for me to start looking into the docs about what maybe I've done wrong there. But at that point, I might come back and say, right, okay, we've got some jobs here now. My job first is my build stage. And the first thing I want to do is my steps. I also need a runs on property. It might be like Ubuntu latest or Linux latest. Oh no, Ubuntu latest was right. There you go. My memory serves me well. And this is the point there where I can start bringing in some of these other actions here. So I can go ahead and do checkout, for example. Go and find that checkout step here. Go and copy that in. Boof. And there we go. So obviously I can go and tidy some of that up. I just need to sort the indenting a little bit there. But there we go. So you can see, of course, they've got some things without comments in there. So there's a little bit of me needing to have my diligence about me here and actually go and start editing and reading through some of the what the tool is trying to tell me. I need to go and start looking at that. But I could do something like I think it was repository self, for example, just like that. I can go and get rid of the majority of that, and then we can go and do other things. Then we can go and add my my other actions. So let's go and cross post, for example. I could just go and do user Chris Reddington Hugo cross poster at main. Sorry, uses, not user. And again, you can see how the tool itself is actually helping me in saying there's something wrong here. So the tooling itself is actually pretty helpful in terms of writing all of this out. For some reason, the actual prompts, like the IntelliSense stuff, aren't popping up on my browser right now. But generally, when they... oh, there we go. Control space. I should read my screen more, shouldn't I? Use control space to trigger. It looks like they've changed it since I was last playing around properly.
Yeah.
But here you
So
go.
that's fairly similar to the way the likes of the bicep and ARM add-ons for VS Code work. Control space will tell you what it expects next, or what options you have, and it is very helpful, especially recently learning bicep myself. The control space is right. What is this expecting? And it goes as far as telling you what's even required, because it could give you a list of 10, but only 3 of them might be required, 10 options, and only 3 would be required. So that IntelliSense is built into this platform and to the add-ons for the likes of VS Code is fantastic, especially from a learning perspective.
And if anyone was watching, by the way, as Carl was talking, I quite literally just kept, I deleted everything there. I'll do it again just in case anyone missed it. Break new line, control space, here are my options. Okay. Oh, look, now it's automatically gone and popped that out for me. And I can start looking and going, okay, this is one that I want here now. And there we go. That is now effectively a GitHub action workflow ready to go and commit there.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks. So that'll give anybody watching an idea of where to get started and how to get started. But I mean, I think the takeaway from that is it'll help you build them if you're not familiar. And there's a lot of documentation, as you can see on the right-hand side of Chris's screen there, that'll help you become familiar. And if that's not enough, go and dig into the GitHub repositories from where these actions come from, and there'll be plenty of documentation to get you going.
And there's some great documentation as well, just, normal GitHub action workflow documentation, not specific to a certain action here either. Yeah, I was going to make a point and I've completely forgot what it was now. It's gone. Can't have been important. It'll come back.
Okay, grand. So let's step a bit a few hundred feet above GitHub Actions. So you're using some of the GitHub Actions for your general process and your workflow in the other context. Do you want to talk about your logging your issues and logging things to your projects and how you manage your general end-to-end workflow?
So I'm going to actually jump across to the Azure portal for a sec to give you the beginning part of the process for episodes first. So let me just remember where I've saved this one, because I was saying before we went live, Carl, wasn't I, that I've been doing a lot of changing of things over here and making my platform a little more robust. So things are a bit in flux at the moment here. But something that I've got going on here is... I'm going to try and do this without revealing any email addresses of my email, put it that way. But effectively what happens is when an event is added to my cloudwithchris.com calendar here, what I do is I have a series of steps that go ahead, fire off a GitHub action. They don't fire off a GitHub action. They create a GitHub issue in my repository, basically for a new episode. And they also create a calendar item on my girlfriend and my calendar to say I'm recording, I'm busy at that time, so we can kind of keep in sync on when I'm recording, when I'm busy. But this is actually the start of my process. So if I just go ahead on my calendar on my other screen here and just type in, let's just create a new event on my calendar. Cloud with Chris recording, hello world. Because everyone loves a hello world. Right, so that is now done. I can see it has now synchronized over to my shared calendar with Katie. So if I jump back to my GitHub issues, at this point, I should see, hopefully very shortly, a new episode suggestion. No, it won't. It won't, because I've changed all of my stuff over. I told you there'd be something that would go wrong.
Yeah, we'll stumble across something that's broken.
Indeed. But once I've gone and fixed that, what it will go and do is it will create a GitHub issue here for me in this kind of format. So episode suggestion, : and then some kind of name here. I'm just going to refresh just to check. Yeah, I'm not being impatient. That is broke. I need to go fix that. So let's start it here instead. Imagine it magically happens here. So I'm going to do nothing else. I'm going to create that as a blank issue here. Episode suggestion, hello world. What's going to happen is a GitHub action is going to run here. And this is just another GitHub action workflow. But what this one does is, if we look in the workflow file for this, it's coming in and checking if there is a new issue being created, and if that title of that issue contains the words episode suggestion, then what it's going to do is it's going to automatically add it to one of my project boards for me. Because I'm a very visual person, I don't really do a whole long list of issues very well. I prefer seeing things visually. So if I jump across, yay, things are broken. Again, I made changes yesterday, and you can see this is why here, because it's trying to point back to my old repository. So what I did was I moved my repository from my Chris Reddington account into a Cloud with Chris organization, because I'm starting to build a load of repositories. So again, just little things I haven't had a chance to fix since pretty much last night before work today. But then what you would see, as has been the case for all of these issues over here that are gone and already happened in the past, they would then get added there. So for example, if I just go and filter down on this one, again, ignore the first couple here, but you can see that there are a ton down here that have all been successful where they've gone ahead and executed there. So so GitHub Actions is not just about the CI/CD, it can be the end-to-end orchestration as well.
Yeah, and that, I mean, what you're doing there is clear, just managing your pipeline or workflow. I don't really know what word to use, because they both have multiple meanings and when talking about this stuff, but you're managing your ideas, your idea generation from having the idea through to completion, all through GitHub with the issues, the GitHub Actions, and the projects. So for anybody like yourself and myself to an extent who is a visual person, this helps to keep track of what you need to be doing and what's next. And it's certainly a far cry from the OneNote that I use.
And that's where I started, right? I've still got my OneNote. There's still things that go in there, like when I'm for the cloud drop stuff, though I haven't made one of those episodes in a while, I pretty much just raw kind of type stuff out there. So there's still absolutely need for tools like OneNote, etc. I think for the process or the idea generation almost, and the kind of piecing the backlog, right? That's really what we're talking about here. I used OneNote for a while, but would I be able to deal with OneNote for 96 issues? I don't think I would be able to. All of these have got, well, not all of them, but the majority of them have got milestones against them. So I can go ahead, for example, look at the different milestones, see what I've got coming up, what I've got to do when. In fact, I can see May is actually all complete, so I can now go and close out May, for example. So there's ways that I can kind of go and manage that work then for myself as well. And GitHub Issues is back to your point at the very beginning about Azure DevOps versus Azure Boards, for example, versus GitHub Issues. Issues is very lightweight. It's not like boards where you've got iterations and sprints and area paths and all these things. It is super, super lightweight. So again, it's those kind of things just to consider which approach do you kind of want to take, and you can use best of both there.
Excellent. So we've spent all of this time in the last episode and in this episode talking about using Azure Storage and the static web stuff for presenting your blog, and the GitHub Actions for automating a lot of that and making it as efficient as possible.
Yes.
So does Azure Static Web Apps blow all of that out of the water?
100% yes. Yes, Your Honor.
Now that's the easy answer.
Exactly.
Give us some more detail then.
Absolutely. What, you want more?
So the answer is yes.
Yes, full stop. Next question. Yeah, no, it is. It is so much easier. Now, actually, to take that back a step, right? If I jump back to cloudwithchris.com here, so when I made Cloud with Chris, it was a time before static web apps existed. So had that existed, it would have made the overhead of all these GitHub Action workflow files that we've been looking through here super, super trivial. I would not have had to write any of those, really. I mean, the podcast side, yes, I would have needed to upload MP3 files still. So there are some that I would have needed to made myself. But for the core site, the core platform itself, no, I wouldn't have needed to. And if we jump into that GitHub Workflows folder again, you'll notice that we have this kind of Azure Static Web App and then long name thing here, YAML file. And actually all this is just a GitHub Action workflow file which has been committed to my repository by Azure Static Web Apps as part of the creation experience.
I was about to say, with a name like that, that's got to have been automatically created.
It is. So if we jump over to the Azure portal, go ahead, we'll find Static Web Apps. Here we go, which is now generally available, by the way, as of about a month ago. So I'll just go ahead.
And the pricing on that, when I was looking at it, is still really pretty good for the sort of data footprint and throughput and everything that you're looking at for your blog, and most of us are probably looking at for our blogs. The pricing on that is still quite
absolutely
pretty good. I mean, majority free, if I remember reading it correctly.
Yeah, there's one free plan. There's then the standard plan, and the real difference, I think, is going to come down to how many custom domains do you need, the size of your app, and if we're talking static content, you shouldn't have a huge app. And you can still offload some of that, right? Like, I wouldn't put my MP3 files in there. I would still put them in the storage account in a CDN, for example. But staging environments will probably be the big one. Like for me, I have more than 3 things on the go at once. I have my main dev and staging environment that I want to persist almost. And then I have a number of preview things that I'm working on the go. So for that alone, I would probably pay the extra per month just to get the standard tier.
But even that doesn't look like it's a major cost either.
And it was interesting because one of the things I was trying to get to the bottom of is, does that come with a CDN? Because it implied throughout the docs that it's globally distributed, which implies CDN, but I don't see anything anywhere about CDN, and I'll link it in maybe in the show notes for this one. There was a Twitter conversation I was having with Anthony Chu, who is one of the PMs for Azure Functions, Static Web Apps, etc. Excuse me. And what he said is, for the majority of applications where they've had that global kind of nature, there is some kind of distribution built into the service, and for the majority it was enough. It's only when they got to some particularly gnarly kind of applications where they needed to put a CDN in front of it. So I know it's not quite a clear-cut answer, but it's kind of interesting that...
It was one of my next questions. Are you still needing the likes of Azure CDN in front of this? And I think, if I'm picking up correctly, the answer is, for the most part, no.
That's how I interpret it.
And perhaps you have a corner case somewhere that might need a CDN in front of it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the best way, like anything, right, is to go and test it. There's tools like GeoPika and others, and more that you could go ahead and almost test latency from different parts of the globe and try it out. So I think it's one of those that if you just want to be really sure, go ahead and test that out. Because as much as someone says that's how it's worked in certain scenarios, is there potentially the edge case where actually you do need the CDN, and it's always going to be the app by app basis, isn't it? But in terms of the setup experience, though, super, super simple and easy. Sign in with GitHub here. You can see that I can go and just authorize, use my password, confirm. And then what I will do then is pull in all the organizations that I've authorized. Now, you'll notice I didn't actually go ahead and authorize access to Cloud with Chris yet. So let me go back again. Just create that one more time. I need some theme music. Right, sign in with GitHub. Here we go again. Or elevator music. So here what I'm going to do is explicitly grant Cloud with Chris organization access to static web apps effectively here. So I'm going to click grant. You can see that's now ticked, and that's all looking nice and happy there. Go and authorize that. And now what we'll see in the organization list is Cloud with Chris. So I could now go ahead, cloudwithchris.com, go to my branch, hit master, review and create, and then I could go and click create. And at that point, what would happen is you would get an object in Azure get created, which looks a little like this. So this is the resource that we saw the workflow for a little bit earlier. So if I just click on this, this is a way outdated version of my site. But it goes ahead and builds that for me and goes and deploys it as well. I even get things like the multiple environments. You know that I had the different workflows to kind of create different folders and things and different storage accounts, blah, blah, blah. It deals with all that for me. I only need one static web app.
So, I mean, this is quite obviously built on or very closely related to app service. So this would be the approximation of deployment slots.
I assume so. I don't really know how it's built under the covers, to be honest, but similar analogy, I think is fair. But it does so much more as well. I think there's a lot of things that I can't get or I can't do without quite a lot of hard work in my Azure storage-based approach and static websites there. So role management, for example, I can turn on a requirement for logging in to go and visit all of the site, for example, nice and easily here. I can go ahead and upload Azure functions to be the backend APIs of my static web apps. So just because it's called static content we talked about last time doesn't mean it needs to be truly static, right? You can have these APIs to make a dynamic nature of your site here as well. Custom domains, all these things that you would expect to see, you can go ahead and bring those in as well. So it's so much more than just the static content storage. It's a wrapper around it with some additional functions and features as well.
Excellent. So that's if you were starting again, you'd go static web app.
Yeah.
What about now? Would you be encouraged to
100%.
Migrate everything to static web apps?
100%. Chris Wright has asked that actually in the chat there. I could just.
I didn't even. I just glanced down to the chat. And was like,
pretty much the same time.
I just asked that question. Great minds, Chris. Great
exactly.
Minds.
Yes, I would. But in all honesty, like any kind of real world project, right? Where is it on my priority list? It's way, way down because the features that are there, yes, if I was starting from scratch, they would be super compelling for me to start with that and go with that. I've got all that functionality right now. There are other areas I want to focus on, like my integration platform, kind of social media posting and all that kind of stuff, the content that I'm writing, rather than this. So for now, it's not the biggest priorities. It will definitely get done. It's just a case of when rather than if, because I do see the value of this as a platform, especially things like these environments, even things like the role management as well. Like, would there be a scenario one day where I want to go ahead and actually make an authentication built in to the site or sub-sites? Who knows? Maybe. And it opens up some doors and possibilities for me there as well.
Excellent. So we're getting close to the hour mark there. So I think we'll cover a couple of more questions. But if there's anybody in the chat that wants to ask Chris anything about what he's been speaking about so far, then please throw something in the chat, and I'll pose the questions to Chris. So we talked before about how you promote your blog and are you using any Azure services to do that or to support that, and I think you suggested that might be an entire episode by itself, so that might be another opportunity in a couple of months just to come back and chat about how you promote cloudwithchris.com, and how you contribute to the community and how Azure supports you doing that. So that's 2 episodes so far to show how GitHub Actions and Azure platform supports your community contributions. But as far as promotion and getting the name out there, it'd be interesting to see what ways you've got to automate that. Do you want to mention that for a moment or two while we're seeing if anybody has any questions?
Absolutely. In a nutshell, imagine a proper full-blown integration platform. That's effectively what I'm starting to build here. So a very high level, what I've got is a couple of Logic apps which watch some RSS feeds, my episodes and my blogs as 2 separate entities. Then I have got that goes into a table storage, Azure table storage, nice and cheap. Then what I've got is an Azure function. In that Azure function, I dynamically render a web page. And on that web page, I have rendered all of the different episodes that are pending my approval, if you like, and pending me to send some social posts out. Then what will happen is on that web page, it's all static content based, so I can go and add various paths that I want to add. So, hey, I want to post immediately to Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I want to schedule something for Facebook, LinkedIn a bit later, and I want to add it to a roundup list, for example, that I'll maybe do a monthly newsletter or a weekly newsletter or something else.
And then, if you're writing everything to table storage, you could use your function then to be posting random articles just to keep.
Well, I don't quite do that there. So what I do is I approve those messages because I might not necessarily want everything to be posted about. There's some things I might just go, actually, that's not worth the update, or I don't want that to be posted immediately. I want that to be at a certain point. So what I do then is once it's approved, it gets transformed, a few things happen, gets added to Service Bus topics. So then I've got different Logic apps, which whether it's an immediate thing, whether it's a scheduled thing, or a we're doing the monthly roundup newsletter, I now have the functionality and the flexibility to then start routing those to where they need to go. And for me, that was a really big thing, because where I'm ultimately going with this, people see that I regularly share the Azure updates, the GitHub updates, all those things. I am not on Twitter every 3 or 4 hours. I can guarantee you all of that. I would never get any work done. I'm scheduling all of that stuff. But I know there are certain things which are more appropriate on Twitter versus LinkedIn versus Reddit, and I want to be able to have much more granularity and customizability of where they go, how I schedule all those things. And that's what drove me down this path, and is actually becoming a really powerful platform. And I can see me integrating a lot more into it as well, and the possibilities are starting to bubble up and balloon out. So I actually mentioned in my vlog yesterday, Jamie Maguire, eat your heart out. Maybe I'll start making a SaaS based upon scheduling of social media posts across platform. We can combine forces and have Twitter analytics and social media post scheduling, perhaps. So let's see. Potentially interesting times.
Looking forward to seeing how that develops. So I don't think there was any questions. So I think that's, unless there's anything you want to add and something that you want to call out that we haven't covered yet. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground again tonight.
No. Only thing is, don't be an idiot like me and go ahead and migrate stuff and build stuff the day before you're presenting on something. That's a bad idea, people. Don't do that. It doesn't make for good demos.
I like real demos where
exactly.
where you see problems. The perfect world scenarios that you see in a lot of places aren't fun, because then you go and try it and you're like,
it didn't work like that. Yeah,
this isn't how it was on YouTube.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight. I think the only one question or point that was directed at me, if anybody follows me on Twitter, a quick shameless plug. My wife and I are raising some money for 4 awesome charities. My hair will be getting dyed blue, Azure blue, at the end of the month. So check out irishtechie.com for details. We've raised over £1,700 already. The target is 2,000. I think if we get to £2,000, I'm going to have a glittery blue beard. Thank you, Simon Lee, for that idea. But basically, we're towards the end of the month. My hair is going to be dyed blue. We're going to donate all of that's me with pink hair originally, 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago. And so my hair will be getting dyed blue. My beard, thank you, Simon, will be going a glittery blue sort of color. And then we're going to donate whatever we raise to the 4 awesome charities that Chris is scrolling towards at the moment.
Absolutely. And
so basically, the story behind this is that once upon a time, the child in the picture further up, that article is 18 in a couple of weeks. Actually, she's 18 on the same day my hair will be going blue. And I once, had pink hair, so we decided, or I didn't decide, my wife dared me into dyeing my hair Azure blue at almost 38 years of age. So sure, it'll be a bit of crack. We're raising some money for some awesome charities, so I'm looking forward to it, actually. And there's the charities, obviously, that we're supporting there. The top 2, one based in the US and one based in the UK, supporting STEM representation for underrepresented minority groups, and then Action Mental Health, because Chris, you've had your own series or shows about mental health, and this last year, and feels like a year and a half at this stage, almost a year and a half,
Yep.
Has been quite hard on everybody. And the charity is one quite local to us in Northern Ireland here that supports people with mental health struggles. And then the final cause, nominated by a member of the community, Isadora Katanich. Hopefully I got that name correct. So Izzy recommended the Two Tam Orphanage in Vietnam. She's been there in recent years to support the works that are going on there. So I'm pleased to say that a quarter of the money, had to work that out there, so 1 out of 4, a quarter of the money, it's late, a quarter of the money shall be going to the Two-Tam Orphanage in Vietnam. But yes, there are so many people that have already contributed to this, and the support across the community has been fantastic. So yeah, if you want to see me suffer / get blue hair and a glittery beard, then check out the blog post, and we'll be live streaming the blue hair on the 25th of June.
Excellent. Look forward to it.
So
brilliant.
Yeah, so thank you to everybody that's tuned in so far. And if you're watching this on catch up on YouTube or on Chris's podcast, then thank you for tuning in the future.
Excellent. Carl, thank you for playing host this evening and being an excellent host. We'll get another session scheduled to talk about the Grand Monster integration platform at some point.
Sounds good. I look forward to getting to grips with that. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Excellent. Thank you, Carl. So there we go, folks. Another brilliant session there with Carl. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you for listening in to me ramble on for an hour or so with some guided questions from Carl there. Just cannot stress enough the great work that Carl is doing there with the fundraising. I'm glad he got to mention it in there at the end, but I just really want to emphasize, if you can donate, there are some great causes there, and we all get to see Carl change his hair blue. So who knows, maybe next time, if we can schedule it in, we'll see a different looking Carl there. So let's make that happen. So otherwise, you know what to do. Firstly, donate. That's something you definitely need to do. But secondly, please like, please subscribe, please hit the notification bell if you have liked this content, and of course on any other platform that you happen to be watching in on as well, please do the same. And with that, thank you again. The support is always appreciated from us all here, and until the next session, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye for now.